All right. Looks like we're recording.
Yep.
All right. Well, this is Two Beards in a Bible. This is Dave Tenney,
And this is Johnny Swano.
and it's good to have you with us. And we are in the book of Acts, and I think we finished chapter 6. Where are we?
We're in chapter 7, verse 9.
There we
So
go.
we're starting to talk about Stephen's address to the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, and we've gotten down to he went through the history lesson of Abraham and
Isaac
the
and Jacob.
beginnings of Israel, and so now we're moving on and going to talk about Joseph,
Yep.
and he's going to tell them what they already know.
Yeah.
But for as we mentioned, I think for a good purpose to let them know that he
knows.
knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Why don't you read, is it my turn or your? It's my turn, I think.
Okay.
I'm going to read through 16.
Okay.
Starting at verse 9, he says, "And the patriarchs, becoming envious, sold Joseph into Egypt. But God was with him and delivered him out of all of his troubles, and gave him favor and wisdom in the presence of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Now a famine and a great trouble came over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and our fathers found no sustenance. But when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out our fathers first. And the second time Joseph was made known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to the Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives with him, 75 people. So Jacob went down to Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers, and they were carried back to Shechem and laid in a tomb that Abraham bought for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem."
Okay. So there we have, basically the recounting in short of Joseph and how he was sold into slavery and became the governor.
Yeah.
He was put into a high place, trusted by the Pharaoh.
And when we started off, we talked about the patriarchs. And of course, those were the sons of Jacob that all of the Jewish tribes were named after. That's who we're talking about.
Right.
And when we talk about the tribe of Reuben, Reuben was one of Jacob's sons. And, Levi was one of Jacob's sons. So.
Right. And there's what was it that Jacob, that his sons, they didn't take kindly to Joseph. And,
No.
His brothers.
Because they
his
were
brothers
jealous
didn't.
of Joseph.
Right. And why was that?
Because he had a pretty coat.
Yeah, he had great favor with his dad,
Oh, yeah.
with his father, and
Then he had some dreams that he's talking about. There all the sheaves and the other sheaves bowed down before his sheaf, and
right, and just there's kind of a mirror image here, maybe with what we're seeing with Stephen and this council.
Yeah,
he's telling them truths from
Yep.
God, and they're getting angry. And they want to take hold of him and do something with him. And here, we have Joseph, and he's saying things along the same line, sort of. He's telling the truth, and his brothers are getting mad at him. There's all kinds of parallels here.
I didn't
It's
even think
interesting.
about that. That's a parallel I didn't even think about.
Yeah, they're just everywhere, and that's again, that's the beauty of what's going on here. And I'm sure we'll say this 1,000 times before we get through chapter 7. But, all of this is just reminding the council that, their fathers wouldn't listen to Moses. And likewise, these guys refuse to listen as well. And it's just put so well that you have to have help not to understand it. And not to get it. And here again, they have that help in the way of the confusion and the selfishness of their nature, I suppose.
Yeah. And certainly, Joseph's brothers did that because of jealousy, and the Jews are doing this to the Christians because of jealousy.
Yeah.
The same thing. It's
the
same root. He talks about the story of Joseph in Egypt. And of course, Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers. And he is sold to a fella named Potiphar. And God has a plan. I think this is, talk about the providence of God.
Yeah.
God has a plan so that Joseph will get to speak to Pharaoh. But it's not the plan that Joseph would have came up with.
Right. And that's the truth with, which way would we have chosen to make that happen?
You just walk right up to Pharaoh's house and knock on the door, right?
or there would be some glorious, battle.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the mind of man is just not up to understanding the way that the Lord works in His ways, and it's like it's like playing chess with somebody that knows how to play chess.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to play chess with somebody that can think 500 moves ahead,
right?
That's what this is like.
Right. That's the kind of competitor you need.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now me, I'd be gone.
I was in chess club in high school for the sole purpose of my girlfriend was there.
Oh, okay.
I learned how to play chess, but I don't know that I ever got good at it.
Yeah. I had an uncle who liked to play chess, and he beat the crap out of you every time. And he also loved Othello. And nobody ever beat my Uncle Jerry at Othello, ever.
I don't even
like
know
in
what
history.
I don't even know what that is.
I can't remember how to play it, but I remember playing it as a kid.
Is it a card game?
No, it had it's like a funny, looked like a stop sign, if I remember right. And it had all these like white and black pegs or something.
Huh.
I don't remember. It's been a long time. Here's what I do remember. I couldn't beat Uncle Jerry. That's what I remember. He was way smarter than me. So we have Joseph, and he's bought by Potiphar. And so he gets tested by Potiphar's wife, right? So she tries to seduce him. And it shows what kind of character Joseph has, because I think if I was in his position, I may not have done what Joseph did.
Right. Yeah, and it, again, we have the picture of someone who is innocent.
Yes.
And their life doesn't take the easy course.
Right.
And being sold by his brothers, and now he's in another predicament.
Yeah. Now he's a good-looking young man.
Yeah.
And his master's wife is trying to seduce him.
Right, and that might very well be the way in the mind and the feeble mind of a man. That might be the way into some power. Because maybe the wife would have some pull. Obviously, would have some pull towards her husband, and he could have worked to elevate his stature that way.
Right.
And a lot of times people take that road. And the lesson is just stay true to what is biblically sound. What the Lord would be happy with, and His promises will be kept.
Here's the crazy thing. Joseph doesn't succumb to that temptation,
right?
But yet suffers the fate as if he had done it.
Right.
Because he gets thrown in prison because now here's another parallel.
Yeah.
What did his wife do? She made false accusations against him. Mm-hmm. He didn't do anything, but she, just like the Jews here are making against Stephen. Another parallel.
And they would be intimately familiar with this account. And there's no doubt in my mind that this whole speech is designed at every turn to get into their heads.
And to make them think about all of these things.
Exactly.
Right? So then Joseph gets thrown into jail. He interprets some dreams. He of a baker, and who was the other guy? The guy who's like the wine taster.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Can't remember who the other guy was. But anyways, I think it's the baker gets I think he's executed, and the other guy who's like the food taster is restored back to his position, and then Pharaoh has a dream, and then the Pharaoh's servant says, "Hey, there was this guy back in prison who can interpret dreams," and this is how Joseph gets in front of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And of course, as he's go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, of course, as he was saying, then all of the Joseph interprets a dream. There's the 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of famine. Joseph becomes government over all of Egypt, and that's basically how the Jews got into this foreign land, and they stayed there for 400 years.
Yeah.
And of course, what happened too was then like the pharaohs eventually forgot about them. Go ahead.
Right. No, well, you were thinking I had to go to my second brain here because the scripture popped into my head, Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. That whole idea with Joseph just reminded me of that.
Yeah.
He was faithful. He was working towards what he understood to be a godly purpose, and it worked together for good.
Yeah.
Yes, he had some troubles. He was left for dead.
Yeah.
Sold into slavery, been to prison, been through all these, all these issues in his life. But yet, as we understand, all things work together for good for him.
Who was it that was, I want to say if it was the Hebrew writer that said that, was it Joseph that chose not to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin? Was that Joseph? Can you look in your magic box and see if that's what? Just search for passing pleasures of sin Bible verse. I can't remember if that was Joseph or not. See, this is why you should do your research beforehand.
My brain wouldn't hold it all anyway. But Hebrews 11:24 and 25, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin.
Right.
So it was Moses.
Yeah, so that was Moses, but I would say that kind of same thought it applies to Joseph as well.
Absolutely.
So,
and there's even a parallel to Christ in this, being innocent and being accused
and suffering.
Yeah,
for being innocent. So
right.
So the Jews were oppressed for 400 years, and then of course, let me see here. So they were there 400 years, and it says that Joseph was made known to his brothers. Another awesome thing to read in the Bible is the scene where Joseph reveals himself to his brothers.
Right.
Oh, that is awesome. Back in Genesis, you get a chance to go read that. That's an incredible thing to read.
And interesting, it always struck me that they didn't recognize him.
Yeah.
I mean, would he have changed that much?
I think he was a boy.
Yeah.
And of course, about 20 years had passed.
Yeah. I suppose.
You
and I look the same as we did 20 years ago.
No.
Right?
You ever see somebody from high school and you're like,
what happened to
man, you got old. But, go look in the mirror, buddy. Get your yearbook picture out and set it beside the mirror. And you'll say, yeah, okay. I ran into this girl that I went to high school with, and she said, oh, don't you? She goes, you remember me? She goes, I really haven't changed too much. And I wanted to say, well. But I didn't. I'm like, oh, no.
Right.
So that's probably what went on there.
Right.
I would imagine. What else do we got? So Joseph, he, instead of like executing his brothers like I would have done, right? he calls his family to him. And there's about 75 people there. Of course, if you're obviously counting his father and all his brothers and their wives and kids and all that stuff. And then, of course, he died there. And, of course, all the patriarchs would have died in Egypt as well. I don't think about that very often, but that's where, all of them would have passed away there too.
Right.
So that ends our talk about Joseph in Egypt. So where are we at time-wise? Oh, we're good. We got 14. So now, John, let's talk about Moses.
All right.
So you want to read 17. Boy, ain't no reason to read. Read 17 and stop where you want to.
Okay. But when the time of promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt, till another king arose who did not know Joseph. This man dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our forefathers, making them expose their babies so that they might not live. At this time Moses was born and was well pleasing to God, and he was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. But when he was set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own son. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deeds. Now when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren and the children of Israel.
Okay. So it talks about the Israelites' time in Egypt. And it talks about this time. He says that the Pharaoh arose that didn't know Joseph, and it says here that it says making them to expose their babies.
Yeah.
And that's where the Egyptians looked around and they saw, man, there's all of these Hebrews. There's more of them than we are, and they said that, I forget what it was, that the Hebrew children had to be killed.
Well, I was just looking, Exodus 1 at verse 22 says, So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, Every son who is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive. So he was wanting them to cast them into the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was. What does that mean, to expose them?
I think that's what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Because it says at that time Moses was born.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of drawing their minds back to that time when, there was this horrible thing that happened in Egypt.
Right. And going back to what you were saying, in Exodus 1 at verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph, and he said to his people, Look, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we.
Yeah.
Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And it happened in the event of war that they also join our enemies and fight against us, and so go up out of the land. So yeah, that's that's probably been played out many times throughout history, just like that. Is a power play.
Yeah, and it's almost like what's going on here with the Jews and the Christians.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are all these Christians. There's all these people following them, and
right.
They're now the Jews are kind of in the place of the Egyptians.
Yeah, that was the whole. Let's get rid of Christ before he starts a big rebellion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the Egyptians were doing to the Jews at that time. Same thing. There's another parallel, John.
Right.
Lots of them in here. So it says Moses was born and was well-pleasing to God, and he was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. But when he set out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own son. So here you have this child that's born, and the child now it was brought up in his father, now it goes into this other household and is raised. And basically, he hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
Right.
When you think strategically, let's think of, how one might infiltrate their enemy in a time of war. Oftentimes, maybe you might send a double agent in behind the line.
Yeah.
And think about what's happening here. God has set up someone of his own people to be in the house of the very one who hates his people and is working actively against them. He's eating from his table. He's learning from
the best teachers.
And there's just, again, as you look back at this, this is a really exciting story.
Yeah.
an account. Let's not use the word story. It's an exciting account of something that, this would play out just as well as the best written screenplay.
It says that Moses was mighty in words and deeds. Mm-hmm. He was like a superhero.
Yeah.
He was a pretty awesome dude. And it says that when he read verse 23, it says, when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren. And I don't think that means he was just like going down to mom's house for Sunday dinner. Of course, they wouldn't have had Sunday dinner then.
Right.
Right. But I don't think that's what it's talking about. It seems like that it came into his heart to try to do something for them.
He obviously understood where he came from.
Yes.
And understood, who he was. And so he was just investigating as any of us would do.
Right. So I'll pick up on 24. It says, and seeing one of them suffer wrong, one of the Jews, he defended and avenged him who was oppressed and struck down the Egyptian. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand, but they did not understand. Let's just stop there. Mm-hmm. Do you think Joseph killed this Egyptian because God told him to do that, or do you think he just did that on his own?
Yeah, I think he did that on his own.
I do too.
And I think, I'm thinking about that, you can draw from where's he coming from and how's he been raised, and he's seeing the oppression, and obviously has maybe the mind of the royal mind that I'm going to fix the wrong, and so that's what he sets out here to do. Probably, obviously, a hasty action.
Yeah.
But I think the big issue is that, he struck down an Egyptian.
Yeah.
Which was probably not a good thing to do.
I think Moses at this point maybe needed to do a little work on his faith. Mm-hmm. Because I think he, rather than putting things in God's hands, he took matters in his own hands.
Right.
So it says, and the next day he appeared to two of them as they were fighting and tried to reconcile them like a judge. He says, men, you are brethren. Why do you wrong one another? But he who did his neighbor wrong pushed him away, saying, who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday? And then at this saying, Moses fled and became dweller in the land of Midian, where he had 2 sons. Mm-hmm. So obviously this thing had become known.
Yeah, and maybe in his mind, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
He thought he was helping.
Yeah.
There at the moment, but there again, even if he was, they didn't see it that way, right. And so he in effect is going home, and he doesn't receive the welcome that he thought he would.
Yeah. So he fled to Midian, which would be like modern day Arabia.
Oh, okay.
And Midian really didn't have, I think, any northern borders. It was basically like a no man's land. Not a great place to live.
Right.
So apparently he found himself a young lady there, or an old lady, who knows? And he had 2 sons by her. So,
yeah, and that I suppose that makes sense. Being a little maybe distraught by the reception that he received from his people, and probably can't go back to Egypt now.
Right. He's kind of in a rough spot.
So let's go out into the woods and and I'm sure maybe it wasn't woods, but but out into the wilderness and let's
she found himself a country gal, and he settled down.
Yeah.
But it says, when 40 years had passed, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in a wilderness of Mount Sinai, and when Moses saw it, he marveled at the sight. And as he drew near to observe, the voice of the Lord came to him. And I'm going to stop there, and I'll let you read from there on. But so he stayed there. So now Moses is about 80 years old.
Yeah.
And when he sees the burning bush, this is the thing that attracted Moses to the burning bush. It never stopped burning.
Yeah.
That's what God is. If you were standing in a field and you saw a tree on fire for like 2 hours, and you'd say, "Why does that thing not fall down?"
And would we be wrong in believing that it was, not only was it burning, but it wasn't being consumed?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking
Yes.
about? Yeah. So, if we go out here and light a bush on fire in the backyard, it's going to flame up and be bright, and then it's going to fizzle out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
But if you saw that sucker burning for an hour,
right.
you'd say, "There's something going on over here." And that's what caught us. He went over there and watched.
Yeah. So that's that would catch your attention. So where do you want me to start reading?
32.
32, and just tell me when to stop.
We're going to stop at verse 36.
Okay. So saying, "I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses trembled and dared not look. Then the Lord said to him, "Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their groaning and have come down to deliver them. And now, come, I will send you to Egypt. This Moses whom they rejected, saying, 'Who made you ruler and a judge?' is the one God sent to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He brought them out after he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years.
Okay. So God speaks to him, and he tells him to, take his sandals off because he's on holy ground. And so this is 40 years after this thing happened, and God's like, "Okay, I've seen the oppression of your people." Mm-hmm. He goes, "So now we're going to do it my way." Mm-hmm. Right? So he's going to send him to Egypt, and he makes this is the thing that's the parallel with Jesus. Mm-hmm. It says, "This Moses whom they rejected," saying, "Who made you a ruler and judge?" is the one God sent to be deliverer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. Now, Jesus, God sent, to be the Savior of the nation of Israel. They rejected.
Yeah. The stone the builders rejected, he became the chief cornerstone.
Absolutely. And now he's the deliverer. Now Jesus is a deliverer. So not an exact parallel, but a lot of the same kind of language that's used.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that this strikes me is that how, and this really doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about directly here, but the what did Moses do when he was in the presence of this burning bush?
He took off his shoes.
Yeah, and he dared not look.
Yeah.
So this is, just to go off on a slight little tangent, people today in the religious world often act like dealing with God is like dealing with your old pal.
Yeah.
And they become too lax in the dealing with the Lord, with His Word, with any part of the Lord's church or anything. People become a little bit too lax, and just
think
you're
about
standing
that
before the Lord.
Yeah.
How are you going to act? And
right.
I think that you're going to be on your knees.
God demands respect.
Right.
The Bible says that when Jesus comes back, that every knee will bow.
Absolutely.
And everybody will recognize that power.
Yeah, and so it's a good thing to remember not to deal flippantly with the things of the Lord.
Yeah, every great world leader will bow.
Right.
every richest person in the world, they will be on their knees.
Right. And, and that no matter what happens, no matter how you're oppressed in this world, in this life, none of that matters
No.
in the end. It's surely unfair.
Right.
Sometimes people are oppressed, but
Yep.
that'll all be taken care
Yeah. So Moses goes to Egypt. He's delivered, and he shows them wonders and signs. Mm-hmm. And they don't believe him because of the hardness of their heart.
Right.
And Jesus comes to the earth, and he shows them wonders and signs. And the apostle Stephen, it said that Stephen did many wonders and signs.
Yeah.
But the Jewish leaders did not believe him.
Sounds like you're talking about the same people.
It does. It does. And I think that's what Stephen's, as we're going through, Stephen's bringing this stuff up.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's saying. Every one of these things he brings up, it's to bring this kind of memory back to them.
Yeah. And when we reach the end of this speech, we understand that they got it.
Yeah, they got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, John, we better stop there.
Okay. Thanks for joining in. This is Two Beards in a Bible. We'll see you next time.
Come on.